Hey everyone, we're Team 3, also known as Team 42. I don't know why. My name's Eddie Rivera. This is
Kevin Groves.
Wilfried.
Stephen Nguyen. And Chris Louie.
And this is our game. It's called Resource Robbers. If you want to read the full story, it's there. It's kind of short. But in essence, we ran out of resources because we squandered them, and that's what humans do. And so now we're finding a different planet, and we have to collect resources there. So 4 different, or 5, different explorers race out to this new planet to get as many resources as they can. Whoever fills up their ship first and makes it back to Earth wins. Simple enough. Volunteers? Right there. And in the blue. You guys want to sign up? So our game is mostly a sort of a combination between a third-person shooter and an RTS strategy game. You pilot a hovercraft from a sort of up and above angle, and again, you're trying to collect resources and prevent other people from getting resources by shooting them, running into them, knocking them into stuff, and also you can get upgrades, get new vehicles, get new weapons, and do more damage. This is our title screen. Intuitive. Options, in case anybody wants to see it. It doesn't have too much, but we did a little credits. It's just our names over and over. There it is. There it is. It works. It works. Some of the stuff we all worked on. Kevin did a lot of, or actually all of our 3D modeling. He and Stephen also worked on animation. All 3 of us worked on the graphics engine. Networking was all Will and Kevin. Game logic was Steve and myself and Chris. Physics, again, Will and Chris. And user input was Chris. That's this menu, and I did the sound. I didn't actually make that. I stole that. Ready when you are. Okay, so we have one of the machines down there hosting, just as a server. Everybody's going to try to connect to that and play. Sometimes it takes a little while. Let's see, filler. Okay. So more of our story, the resource idea just kind of came to us. We were thinking we wanted something fast, something kind of action-packed, and hovercraft seemed to do the trick. Flying around without friction, you're just sort of free-floating, running into things. It's kind of difficult to control, and I think that's sort of what makes the game fun. So down here you see a couple meshes. The hovercrafts all sort of colliding together. They've all got their smoke particle system. And a nice textured terrain, courtesy of Kevin. The bear statue from outside. He spits out the resources. Sure. The world is, if Kevin can use it, it's just sort of a bowl-shaped green thing you see there, the crystal-looking thing, is a resource. As soon as you just run over it, it picks up, gets a little noise. There are trees with like a fire tree. Not sure. We thought it was cool. And again, the statue in the center is the big teddy bear statue out there. Only he's pretty angry this time. So you can kind of follow, see people getting hit around quite a bit. That's what makes it fun, I think. Very difficult to control, especially when you start getting hit. In the upper left corner, the green bars are health bar. The blue is your jump fuel. You can only jump so much. Mostly it's used to get you over little hills or get you out when you're stuck against something. Like that. In the middle, the time remaining, that's just a server clock, so that we don't run over time. And underneath it tells you the number of resources you have. When you gather more resources, you can open the in-screen or in-game buy screen. You can purchase new vehicles, like the one on the left, the Weasel. You can also upgrade to get a radar, and you can buy different weapons. So we have a machine gun and a missile launcher. We'll just power it up there, and have that. You can see, because we're firing a lot of bullets, and each bullet is actually a mesh, we're shooting, I think 5 or 6 in a burst. They're too hard to see, so we actually had to implement little tracer meshes. So you see the little yellow ones kind of shooting off where he's aiming the mouse, kind of back into the left now. The screaming you hear is the angry bear. If he gets hit or run into or shot, he starts spewing out resources. They fly out as fiery meteor balls and land as the green crystal resources. One of the things that we had issues with, particularly in this load, is there's no skybox. Normally there is, but last minute stuff didn't come together as well as planned. The background would normally be just you're limited to 200 by 200 square arena. Also, there's a limit on how far the camera can go back. It keeps you inside the terrain. It kind of adds to that up close feel, so you can't just sit all the way back. You can go pretty far back and get kind of the top down. That's the sound of someone dying. And this is the fun. Just pointing and shooting, trying to kill somebody. And that low bass sound is people buying weapons. We use also a 3D system, so you can feel other people's gunshots as well as your own, and as the camera moves around your mesh, it'll switch channels from left and right. So if you're directly behind, it's sometimes a little faded. When you die, you start at a point way up high and then kind of fall down. And, you keep your weapons, you keep your resources. It's just sort of a timeout to keep you from gaining new resources. And you have unlimited lives, so you can just keep doing this. We previously had the idea of stopping the game after you collect a certain number of resources, but instead, especially for the demo, we decided to do it on a time base. So after 15 minutes, it'll call the game. The thing you see in the bottom right corner, red with the green, is actually a targeting cursor. Got kind of stuck there. There it is. And I think one of the challenges we had with hovercrafts and kind of a mountainous terrain is because you can't exactly follow the terrain, you're sort of offset by sort of Y-value height. It's difficult to really follow the terrain accurately without getting sort of a choppy feel to it. Part of the way we offset that was to just make everything bounce around. So you'll see when people hit a rocky terrain, they just kind of bounce off of it a lot. And I think that sort of fits with our zero gravity hovercraft feel. The smoke particles that are on the cars, what we wanted to do, didn't have time to do, was implement them as you take more damage, switch to like a black smoke or a red smoke to signify damage. We ended up using that for the trees, so you can still see the particles. And another thing we were going to implement was coloring for the vehicles, maybe a different texture, so that you could tell yourself from others. But since you're in the middle of the center of the camera at all times, we figured it was pretty easy to keep track of yourself. It wasn't too big of a deal. See the missile launcher. Normally you would have to have 25 resources to mount that, and 10 for the radar and so on. We just nixed that for now. You can see also that gray particle smoke. They shoot in an arc trajectory, and they do a lot more damage than machine guns, but they shoot considerably slower. Also, they seem to bounce on the terrain, which wasn't necessarily intended, but it was kind of a nice effect. They sort of skip across the train. And as you're getting closer, you can start hearing the 3D sound. Also, because the sound is 3D, it's all positioned centered on the vehicle itself. So as you pan back in the camera, everything kind of gets muted. The loudest things would be the bear, which has a pretty wide radius of where you can hear it, and then the meteors that come flying out of them, impact noises, engine noises, all that. It's kind of limited to a small area. And then the loud annoying buzzer everybody can hear. That stalling moment was when he died. You lose all control of the vehicle, it just kind of sits there for a moment, and then after 3 or 4 seconds, you respawn up top, fall down, and then continue re-rolling. And every time you hear the bear screaming, he's shooting those red projectiles. Those are the meteors. If you do get hit by a meteor, you take a lot of damage. Also, you take a lot of damage if you run into other players or if you get stuck on the edge. Some of the difficulties we had with that were bounding boxes. The trees and the bear in particular were very difficult because it was a thin tree mesh with a big oval around it. So anytime you got anywhere near the mesh, you sort of get sucked into this vortex. Keep spinning around the bear or the tree. Also, just before we had tested this morning, the trees seemed to start just under the vehicle at all times. So every time we started, we were stuck in the tree. Unfortunately, you can't see the skybox. It really kind of adds to the arena. It looks sort of cheesy, I guess, without the exterior. But normally it gives it the effect of a much bigger area. We wanted it close in again for that kind of fast feel. More resource maneuvering. You can see how he's actually getting stabilized. There's both a gravity force and a stabilization force, like a reverse gravity, as well as forward thrust and rotation, all that. So it actually gets pretty complicated to maneuver the vehicle, not just control-wise, but just moving the mesh around in a 3D world. And then detecting collisions with everything else adds to the difficulty. You can also see when the other players get hit, that also kind of knocks them around. They start getting wobbly. And you can see the tops of it. They get stuck on the edge there. One of the things also is the damage is kind of low on the weapons, mostly because we wanted it to be a race for resources. The name of the controllers, rather than just sit there shooting each other up. The shooting is mostly to discourage other people from taking your resources, knocking them around and all that. We we just purchased the radar that's in the upper right corner. The green dots are all of the resources. The red dots are player vehicles. And you're in the center. As you can see by the end, it's rotating when you spin it, so that you always are, up is always the direction of facing. You can also see in the bottom right there's an ammo. We originally had different types of ammo for different weapons, so you would keep, when you upgraded your resources, you would purchase ammo for each of the weapons, so you couldn't just sit there and shoot each other. Another one of the challenges we had was implementing a camera. We were sort of torn between the third person and the top down. I guess the appeal for the third person was that you're more in control of the vehicle, it's more like you're driving. And the top down has more of a strategy feel where you can move the mouse and move the turrets, which it still does, but you could get, I guess, a clearer targeting mechanism. There's also an algorithm in there where if the resources get too low, below a certain point, new resources will spawn automatically. But again, every time you shoot the bear or attack him in any way, he'll start spawning out resources in addition. So, that's our fantastic you lose screen. Kevin lost. And some of the other players had a you win screen. Or somebody did. And that's pretty much our game. Any questions? That was easy. You know, we didn't calculate it. With a single person, it was pretty good. Once we started doing the network, especially with 4 or 5 people, it got a lot laggier than we'd expected. Do you have any idea?
The problem is coming from the network. We have a lot of stuff going through client to server and server from client to client. Because we calculate all the things for physics into the server. And so all the world had to be sending to each client each time for each frame. So maybe it's here the bottleneck.
You had a question too?
Oh, yeah. What features did you enjoy most implementing?
Hold on.
We had the most fun implementing the bear, launching meteors and spawning resources, and making sound effects for that. Awesome roar sound. And yeah, we spent a lot of time implementing the physics in our game. We put in full 3D rotational physics and Cartesian physics too. And yeah, that was probably the most fun about our game, or implementing it.
I think also each part kind of had its own difficulties. Like I assumed sound would be pretty easy when I took it on, and so I was expecting to do a lot of game logic and a lot of other stuff as well. And sound ended up consuming a lot of my time. It was very difficult to get 3D sound working properly, managing emitters and listeners and all that stuff, as you're familiar with. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it just kind of, we mentioned each one by name, and you know, when somebody said network, I didn't want anything to do with that, and Will's really good with networking, Chris is as well, and so they volunteered. Nobody really seemed too interested in the sound, that seemed all right to me. Physics, I wanted nothing to do with that math either. And, you know, the UI and the 3D modeling, you know, we have our two artists, so I really fell to them. I couldn't draw mesh, you know, for if my life depended on it. Oh, in the back? No, I think it was really a collaborative effort. When we first started, we were just sending these big, lengthy emails kind of discussing what we would like in a game, like what we were looking for out of the quarter, and what sort of design aspects really kind of captured us. And it ranged from everything to a flying game, like a jet, you know, flying through obstacles kind of game, to, I believe, dinosaur polo, and, you know, everything in between. So it just sort of, we tried to take the best of what everybody liked, you know, kind of a better graphic system, or as best as we could do anyways. And, yeah, just take it from there, just little by little. Also in the back.
How did you guys create the terrain?
You want to talk about that?
For the terrain, I made a mesh, and then instead of using a height map, I just kind of took the vertices of the mesh and put them into like an array, and then just sorted them like that and made the height map through that. And then I just found some nice pictures online and kind of blended them in Photoshop to put the texture on, and it gave it a nice look, so I liked it. I was happy with it.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised too. When we were originally doing research, we were thinking of doing texture splatting and, you know, shadow mapping and all this stuff. And just the standard texture that Kevin created came out really nice. It came out pretty good at the resolution that we had. And there's also, because the mesh is loaded on the server to get the collisions, you're really loading it twice, and that added a lot of difficulties to the texturing and how we could do it. So you're doing everything on the server first, and then just kind of loading a copy of it later on the client. Also back there?
Bear had a really distinctive roar. Is he actually Chewbacca in disguise?
You know, I just kind of picked that sound at random. It does sound a lot like Chewbacca, though. I just thought the bear always looked like he had a chip on his shoulder. Huh? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, at first we had our camera like above in a third kind of RTS view looking down, and we were finding it hard to, you know, like when you were driving, it was hard to look where you wanted to look while maintaining where you were going and pointing at where you were firing. So we just had to link the camera opposite of where your mouse was. So then we just did that this week, like last night, and so we didn't get a chance to make like a ray to see if there's anything in between your car and your camera to lift you up higher, so we didn't get a chance to do that.
Yeah, we did implement a basic terrain collision, but that's about it, yeah. Go ahead.
I was a bit confused when you were describing how you drew the terrain twice. Are you saying that you drew the terrain on the server and then what did you actually send? Was it just an update to the location of the objects, or were you sending like the actual things to draw? What was transpiring?
Originally, what we did is the server would load the array map and make the mesh there. The client wouldn't do anything with the actual vertices. It would just draw the mesh. So you weren't getting the specific points. You could just fly right through all the terrain. So that's where the challenge came in texturing it, because one side was just like a picture, essentially, and the other side was actually a complicated vertex mesh.
In fact, on the server, we have to compute all the physics stuff. And so we have to collide each object with the ground, because there is the gravity. And the problem is we can ask to DirectX to compute the intersection between two mesh. But for a huge terrain, it's a lot of time spent for nothing. So we decided to simply compute our own 8 map from the mesh on the server side. And on the client side, it's only a mesh to we render as another mesh. That's all.
Yeah, and also we use the same like file on the server and on the client, so it was really helpful because then we could just use the camera. We ended up using the collision again on the client for the camera heights, so it was pretty simple. It was already in there, so it's just a bonus.
Any final questions for Group 3? All right, well, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you all for showing up for the final demonstrations, and let's give